Now, yesterday, Dungeons & Dragons put out an interview with Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins talking about the new version of D&D. Now, up until now, I've been on record of saying I have some doubts and concerns about this game, and I'm not 100% sure that it's really going to be what I want out of Dungeons & Dragons. However, over time, I've gradually warmed up to this game, and now I'm full-on excited about the new version of D&D. Now, I am exhausted, and if you watch my last video, you'll know why, but it was all good news, so it was great. In that video, however, I talked about an interview with Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins where they talked about the new version of D&D, and I felt that they unveiled something that could be a secret surprise for the new edition of D&D. You can watch that video here. However, I took the time to go through the rest of the video and come up with other things that I thought were important to share with you about my thoughts on that video. And in the process, as I've been digesting this new version of D&D, I have become more and more excited about the new version of D&D. But let's dive in. Here are some clips from their interview, and then my responses follow.
Is there any point that it hits you that the revised core rulebooks are coming out?
Often is only when I have the physical book in my hands do I actually feel like it's a real thing. But the printout reviews are sort of the closest I get to that feeling before the fully printed book comes out. And part of that for me is because when we're in the printout review phase, we're still doing so much work. And for me, it is still the thing I'm pouring my heart and soul into, and not something I can take off my designer hat and put on my fan hat. And that's why I love getting the book itself, because then I get to just be a D&D fan and take in what's being offered.
Yeah, similarly, when I see the art next to the text for the first time, that's when it feels most real to me.
I'm actually getting excited, and it feels more tangible to me today. Like, watching this video this morning was the first time I truly felt excited about the new edition. I have to confess that early on during the UA playtest, I had a lot of doubts and a lot of criticisms about the new edition. Of course, we were also still, kind of nursing that OGL debacle wound that I think a lot of us felt. And so I was kind of resistant to this new edition back this time last year. But when I did that review series, where I did 4 videos all about the new edition of the game, and I reviewed all the UAs once they were finished putting out UAs, that was when I first started to get some excitement. But seeing this video and hearing them talk is the first time I think I've really felt like genuinely geeked for this new edition of D&D. Now, as always, you can help out the channel by hitting the like and subscribe button and clicking the notification bell to make sure that you get to see all my latest videos. You can also check out the Wandering Tavern, which is a sponsor of this video. In fact, April is Wandering Tavern month in the Dire Den. It's clearly inspired by Studio Ghibli, filled with fantastic arcana punk flying ships and mysterious dark spirits that contrast the whimsy of this flight and fantasy setting. Explore this immense flying city with all its battle maps and details. Every nook and cranny delve deep into the devious underbelly of the tavern while getting to know its wide range of unique NPCs, patrons, and staff. The Wandering Tavern's dark mysteries and entangled truths are yours to unlock. Use the link in the description and the pinned comment below, so when you back this Kickstarter, you'll also support the Dire Den.
The art helps sort of contextualize every page and sort of ground everything. And you get to see the interactions between the text and the art, which previously had only existed in your mind.
That's really great to hear, that they were looking at the art earlier on in the process than usual, that the art was designed for this book in a more intentional way than any other book they've done. That's fantastic, and I appreciate that effort that they're putting into it.
We have spell art, for example.
Yeah.
You finally get to see some things.
In some cases, spells being cast by the spell's originator.
Yeah.
Like, this is Tasha casting her spell.
This is Melf shooting the acid arrow.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's not a theoretical example. That's a real example in the book of Melf casting his own iconic spell. Bigby is there, Mordenkainen, Jalarzi, Yolande, and others. This is really the first of the player's handbooks that have been done, at least, the last few times, where the art has been developed so closely with the text. Because we planned out what we were going to do with the art when we first kicked off the text work on the book. And normally in our process, our work on what the art is going to be often comes a bit later and is still very much an integrated process with the art and the text together communicating what the book has to offer. But this time, art and text started on the journey together, and that really comes through in the finished product, where you can tell, like when they were writing these words, they had that specific piece of art in mind, and that art is speaking directly to the text that is on the page.
It was important for these products particularly because these are the foundational books of our game.
Yeah.
And so they had to be, the outlines for them had to be incredibly detailed, because to get everything that everybody needs to play the game, and you only have a finite amount of space to do it. Every page, every spread has to be planned well in advance. So we were thinking about the number of pieces of art in every chapter, and where is the art going to appear in each chapter, and next to what sections is it going to be? And that informs what the content of the art will be. Or there are key sections of a book that simply must be illustrated to get a key point across or an idea across. In order to guarantee that the books would actually fit, we had to know that information really early on, even before we started pulling the books apart and putting them back together.
Because good art can really inspire you when you're building your world, your character, your class, and your background and species, all of those things. And they've said that they've got art for each of those things, that there's art for each species, each background, each class, and it helps convey the idea of what these things are supposed to be, and that's going to help you build your characters and your worlds. And I think that's really good. And even if this art style isn't maybe my first choice, like I tend to prefer like darker, grittier art. So this might not be like the ideal perfect art for me, but I understand their intention, and I think these books are just going to look gorgeous. I think they're going to be beautiful books, and we're going to see far more art in this book than any other player's handbook we've ever seen before. That's my understanding, and I'm excited about that.
Someone from the art team actually took a photo of the player's handbook with all the rest of the books, and you see how thick the player's handbook is.
Yes.
It's quite alarming to see amongst the rest of the books all on a bookshelf. It doesn't hit home until you you see how weighty it is there.
There's a lot of UX improvements that have been baked into these books. There's been some reorganization of the books, so things just aren't in the same places that they used to be. The information's there, it's just presented differently.
There are also simply brand new things, whether those are new spells, new feats, new class features, new whole subclasses, new subsystems, but even new general rules guidance. So people are going to find, for instance, some guidance on illusions that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
People are going to, basic things like before, if you were a player and you wanted to know, well, how do I break an object? Well, in the past, you kind of had to follow a trail that led somewhere in the wilds of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now a player can look right in their player's handbook in the rules glossary and find out, how can I shatter that mirror on the wall?
It's very clear that playtesting continued after UA and redesign continued, and there were a lot of improvements. Some of my favorite subclasses, I saw things, I'm like, okay, now this has like a two-pronged keystone moment that improved the subclass fantastically.
Well, and even some of the subclasses that migrated from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything into the new player's handbook, and some of those did not go out into the Unearthed Arcana process, even those went through additional playtesting and development. So people are going to find that some of the subclasses that got picked up have also been improved in a number of ways. And in some cases even have new features, just like the subclasses did that went through the Unearthed Arcana process.
Ultimately, for me to really get excited about this game, it's got to feel new. I've played 5th edition for almost 10 years now. I think longer than 10 years because I was tinkering around with the D&D Next playtest. So I want something new and fresh and exciting out of these books. And I think they're going to deliver. I'm actually getting my hopes up now.
Was there anything kind of surprising during playtest after UA?
A lot of really great insights about just how certain things could work better, how certain things could be clearer. We've also been identifying more unexpected multi-class combinations and
Yeah.
in some cases making changes to prevent the undesirable combinations, but then in other cases protecting the combinations, because there are a number of multi-class combinations that are tons of fun and we want to make sure they stay protected in the game.
And that's really good to hear, because I'm not a fan of multiclassing, but I have players who are, and it's important to protect the game balance. And it's good to hear that they are keeping all of that in mind as they're designing classes, that they're designing them in a way that encourages multiclassing where it's going to be effective and discourages multiclassing where it might be like overpowered or, game breaking.
I think one of the great things about this book is that it's opened the door to many more character concepts. If you have a particular character in mind to play, you have a better chance of being able to create that character with the options in this book than you may have had previously with any other D&D book.
Yeah, when you combine not only all of the subclasses, but also the many more feats, the new approach to backgrounds, then throw multiclassing into the mix.
Yeah.
You have so many ways to mix and match different character concepts.
Yeah.
And yes, more options are better as long as they are well balanced. So I really like hearing that. And there's more.
And promotion of a couple new species to the big time.
So more species in the core book? Is that what he just said?
Yes.
To the big book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, the species art is amazing. It gives you a great example of every species.
One of the fun things about that, and Jeremy spearheaded this, was making sure that each section of the player's handbook, in terms of its art, was kind of delivering on a different promise, or highlighting what is interesting about what's going on in that chapter. The species art being a great example, where all of the illustrations of the species options available to player characters are done as these scenes involving multiple members in situations that you would probably find them very commonly.
Yeah.
Like the halflings are all sitting around a dinner table with each other. The Goliaths are doing, their thing, and the tieflings are doing their thing.
Yes, and the gnomes are definitely doing their thing.
The gnomes are definitely doing their thing.
So place your bets in the comments as to what the gnome art is all about. But Goliath is the species that's getting upgraded to the core book. But wait, he said species plural, and they only mentioned Goliaths right there. So what do you think is the other species that's getting promoted to the core book?
I know how tremendously busy you've been for like the last, 10 years, but 3 years also making this book. Do you get a moment to stop and smell the flowers?
We are working so nonstop, it is actually difficult to pause.
Yeah.
But it's one reason why I love doing things like Acquisitions Incorporated, because while Chris was at GaryCon, the only reason I wasn't there is because I was, that same weekend, I was at PAX East and
running the clown show.
Yes, and running that game is actually one of my chances to just smell the flowers and just enjoy D&D. And I find that is almost always the way I get to smell the D&D flowers best is when I'm just DMing or playing it, and in a non-playtest context, because we do a lot, in our team, we do a lot of playtesting, but that's why for me it's so vital to then go off and just play D&D and DM it as a fan. And I think I've mentioned before in conversations with you in videos, it's one of the reasons why when I'm running my home game, probably my only house rule is that we playtest nothing in my home game. We just play the D&D that everyone else is playing, not whatever we're currently working on in our laboratory here at work, and so that we can just enjoy this game we love so much. Because at the end of the day, even though this is our profession, we are at heart just lifelong D&D fans.
And that means a lot, especially with all the crap we've had to deal with when it comes to Hasbro as a company. To see Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins being so genuine about their love of the game is vitally important, because I honestly believe that these guys are solid guys who do love this game, and they might not be making design choices exactly the way I would make them, but they love this game. Just like I do, just like you do. These guys are genuine gamers, genuine fans of Dungeons and Dragons. And Chris goes on to elaborate about his respect for the previous editions of D&D. Check this out.
Was there anything surprising about GaryCon? Like, you get to interact with fans, you get a moment to talk to fans.
For me, it was a pleasure to be at such a wonderfully run show, and one that had a very intimate atmosphere where, you know, you had no trouble running into the people you wanted to run into, and you ran into a bunch of other people you never thought you would, but you're delighted having done so. And it's a lovely facility in a town steeped in D&D's history. It pervades that con in particular because it's named after one of D&D's grandfathers. You see D&D in all of its forms, you know, from earliest day D&D being played to 5th edition. And it's just a reminder to me that D&D has this amazing legacy, which of course now we get to celebrate in its 50th year. But there's a power to this game and its ability to bring people together and make people happy and to build lifelong friendships. And you see it on display at GaryCon and other shows like it. And so being a part of that legacy, being one of the people who is fortunate enough to be a steward of Dungeons & Dragons for a time, I carry that weight around with me at the show and beyond. And it's like, this is important to so many people. It's very important that we be faithful stewards of the brand and of the game, and to make sure that we're setting it up for its next 50 years.
So for the first time, I am genuinely excited about the new version of D&D. I had my complaints, I had my doubts. A lot of that's on record because, you know, my old videos. But ultimately, I think Jeremy Crawford, Chris Perkins, and the team are working their butts off to make a good version of the game, and I'm excited to see it. So tell me what you think. Thanks again for watching the Dire Den. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm going to go take a nap.